Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the Finding You podcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Thursday, March 19th, 2026. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about boundaries and love. The title might be a little confusing. You might not understand the relationship or the connection, the tie that I'm making between setting our boundaries and love. But I'm going to expound on that as I go along tonight and talk about how love is really a function or a capacity that develops when one has a healthy relationship with themselves and a healthy relationship around their boundaries. And the other thing I'll say before I start tonight, I love to say this to people that I'm teaching, that I'm talking to. Every therapist that you know has either struggled with boundaries significantly and has done a tremendous amount of work, or they're still struggling. But everybody knows the struggle of boundaries. There's no person I've ever met, no therapist I've ever met who has any kind of awareness, who doesn't know what a challenge it is to work, to discover, to execute, to stand by their own boundaries. Before I get into that, let's just go to the housekeeping items. If you're not aware, the Inner Circle has launched. This is a subscription base to the podcast, so you get access to the live episodes. Also, to the Ask Me Anything episodes, both live and recorded. You get content that you don't get anywhere else. It's a very inexpensive price, $100 per year or $10 a month, and you can cancel at any time. So if you're interested, go to our email address or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com or go to our website and use the portal there to learn how to subscribe and sign up. My new book, Stay in the Room, that I've co-authored with Michael and Jeff McLean, will be out April 7th. So if you're interested, we'd love for you to pre-order the book. You can go to Amazon and help us get on that bestseller list. So that'll be coming out and shipped on April 7th. Stay in the Room. It's the story about a father and a son and the work that they had to do. I write a commentary throughout of the work that they did, that they had to accomplish in order to find themselves and really to find a deeper and a richer meaning to life, even spirituality. So I'm excited for that release that's coming up here in just a couple of weeks. The Journey of the Heroic Parent, of course, and The Audacity to Be You are also available and on Amazon and Audible. If you are looking to do a deep dive, if you want to accelerate your therapy, if you're looking really sincerely, if you're looking for something that can in 5 days give you what I would estimate is between 6 months and in some cases 2 years of psychotherapy, our Finding You flagship program is that offering. The next available offering is April 8th through 12th. That's April 8th through 12th. We're going to have actually 3 therapists there. It's going to be run by Jordan June, Keisha Sorensen, and also we have a new therapist that's coming on board who's going to help us develop a psychedelic assisted program in concert with our intensive. So if you're interested in learning about that, this would be a wonderful one to attend. April 8th through 12th is the next offering. May 13th is the one after that. If you are an alumni member, the third Wednesday of each month, we are hosting a support group. April 15th is that next offering. For all of these events, for any inquiries, for private intensives, for couples and for families, if you're looking for a coach or a therapist who works in the model that I teach, email us at info@findingyouprograms.com or go to our website. I have 2 workshops this year. I'm going to be at the Omega Institute again. I'm very excited to have a repeat offering of The Audacity to Be You, Learn to Love Your Horrible, Rotten Self. That will be July 12th through 17th. Again, I'll be co-running this with my daughter, Emma June. And then I will be at the Art of Living Retreat Center in the fall, September 27th through October 2nd, again with Emma Reedy June, and the same offering, The Audacity to Be You, Learn to Love Your Horrible, Rotten Self. So if you're interested, go to their respective websites, eomega.org or artoflivingretreatcenter.org, or you can also contact us and we're happy to connect you with them. With that behind us, let's get into tonight's topic. The organizing idea, the overarching idea of tonight's broadcast comes from a quote from the Buddhist monk and teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. And he wrote, "To love without knowing how to love wounds the person we love." I think boundaries are probably the issue, the subject that I get asked the most about because they're so nuanced, they're so internalized. And really, I think as you will hear throughout the broadcast tonight, nobody really can tell you what your boundaries should be. I state this often, that I often hear myself referenced. People will tell me in various groups, in various settings, they'll say, if you were talking to Brad, he would say X, Y, or Z, or that you should do X, Y, or Z. And of course, you can be confident that that's not an accurate reflection of what I would say, because I don't tell people what boundaries that they should have or what the right boundary to have is. In fact, it just doesn't work that way. Nobody can know the right boundaries. They might have some inkling at the psychology that surrounds the boundary. There might be some evidence that they have that they can read or discern that the boundary is coming from a place of fear or control or anger. And thus it's in essence, its quality is compromised. But boundaries are something that are individual to the person. Nobody gets to decide what your boundary is. Nobody gets to tell you the right boundary to have with a struggling child or a spouse who you're having a great deal of conflict or struggle with. That's something you get to decide, because a boundary is the expression of the edge of yourself. It is what you're comfortable with, what you're okay with. So as we learn to shift our fundamental assumptions around relationship, around people, around love, the idea of a healthy boundary comes into focus for us. As I've stated many times and referenced the story, that when I was teaching a workshop specifically on codependency, one of the participants, a clinical psychologist, asked me the question toward the end of the presentation. She said, "So are you suggesting, and maybe this is too tall of a thing for you to even suggest to any of us, that we need to tell the families, the parents that we're working with, to kick their child out of the home because they're using drugs?" And of course, it was a wonderful question, because I had the opportunity to clarify. And I said, I would never tell somebody what to do. The stakes are too great. In fact, it is consistent with all the ethical guidelines that I know of being a therapist, that it is inappropriate and unethical to give advice to a client when it comes to major life choices, major life responsibilities. And I can't think of anything more sacred with larger stakes than the health and safety of a child. So it would be inappropriate, even if that was my inclination, to do that. What I would do, I explained, is I would help the person become clear about their own attachment history, about their own emotional world. Really help them heal and get into a position, a stance of recovery with regards to their codependency. And then whatever decision came out of that work would be the right decision for them. So again, like I've talked about, this is not different than any other skill or tool, any other behavior that we have. If the fundamental consciousness of the individual, their awareness, their idea about relationship with children, with partners, with people, with neighbors, with friends, if those ideas about those relationships don't evolve to a higher level, then the boundary will be in the service of the lower level of consciousness. It will be, for example, to punish, to control, to prevent an experience of being afraid or anxious. And if you set boundaries from a place of fear, where fear is really the driving motivator, it's hard to get it right. But if your boundaries come from a place of love, principally from self-love, it's almost impossible to get it wrong. So the first lesson about tonight is boundaries are only relevant, they only make sense in the context of this love, this safety, this secure attachment. This awareness that my serenity, my peace of mind, my life, my emotional world is my responsibility. And although I have been told by my parents, by the big people when I was young, by the culture, that setting certain boundaries with certain people is selfish or cruel or unkind, or it means that I don't love, or whatever the accusation is, I have to be able to face that. I have to be able to walk through that. I have to be able to transcend that idea, to in essence, not really care about getting it right, about being good, but rather focus on being my authentic, my true, my real self. And the boundary is the expression of that. The fear, the resistance to setting boundaries, of course, are something that we are all familiar with. When you set a healthy boundary, you don't control the outcome. And most people ask questions about boundaries in the context of controlling the outcome. How is a child going to respond? How is a partner or a friend or a coworker going to respond to it? And when your boundaries are aimed at that kind of a target, it's really about control. You see, boundaries, well set, well established, well communicated boundaries, followed through on, work whether or not the person changes or not, the other person changes or not. Because the boundary is instruction, if you will, to the people around you about what's okay with you and how to stay in relationship to you. One of the things I really like to do when I'm setting a difficult boundary, communicating a difficult boundary to a loved one, where it matters to me, the relationship is important to me, is I will say to them just that on the front end. I'm going to tell you something. And I'm telling you this because this relationship matters to me. If it didn't, I wouldn't tell you. And I would just find a way out of the relationship, away from the relationship. Today, tonight, tomorrow, perhaps eventually altogether. So I'm taking this risk, stating it from a place of self-respect and self-love and care and value for you. And sometimes when I have set that up that way, I talk about this with my wife often, and I've talked about this with a handful of other people in my life also. When I front load the boundary like that, the person begins to understand. They're not so caught up in being wrong or bad or getting it wrong or rejection, right? I'm reassuring them on the front end that this stated boundary is an attempt to stay in relationship to you. And for somebody who's avoidant like myself, who it might not sound like it to you, to the listener, but I am inclined to avoid conflict. I have been afraid my whole life that I would be abandoned in a similar way that I felt like I was when I was a child. So I have resisted the expression, the execution of boundaries, because that assured me that people would like me, people would stay around me. I could give up. I thought of myself as having very broad shoulders, that I could hold a lot. And you know what happens when you show up that way? You end up holding a lot. You end up holding more than is your share. And you end up in relationships and situations, in a job, in a community that's not the right community for you. That's not the right job. That's not the right relationship. As John Lennon famously said, telling the truth won't get you many friends, but it will get you the right friends. Gandhi once stated, and if you've listened to this podcast or read The Audacity to Be You, you've heard this quote, but it bears repeating tonight. Gandhi once stated, "A coward is incapable of exhibiting love. It is the prerogative of the brave." And James Hollis, the psychoanalyst, the writer, went on to say, projection, fusion, going home is easy. Right? Sameness is easy. If you're like me, if we want to do the same things and have the same values and ideas about what's appropriate and what's wanted, that's easy. Loving another's otherness, on the other hand, is heroic. For if we really love the other as other, we have heroically taken on the responsibility for our own individuation. I'm not projecting onto my wife or to my children the idea that they are here to fulfill my needs. I'm taking the responsibility to fulfill my needs. But I have been taught explicitly and implicitly all of my life, as most of us have, that if I don't take care of you, that if you're not the priority, the other is not the priority, then I might be abandoned. You see, I'm clinging to others. Right? That's what the psychoanalyst Erich Fromm meant when he said, the quality of being able to be alone is the same quality that allows us to be in a healthy relationship. If I'm just trying to keep you in, I'm going to sacrifice parts of myself. I'm going to deprioritize myself, not value myself. I might complain, feel resentful, and even self-righteous about it, but I'm going to suffer. So back to what Hollis was saying. Projection, fusion, going home is easy. Loving another's otherness is heroic. If we really love the other as other, we have heroically taken on the responsibility for our own individuation, our own journey. And this heroism may properly be called love. That's what Gandhi meant by love being the prerogative of the brave. You have to have a healthy adult relationship with your fears. You have to know what they are. You have to embrace them. You have to confront and deal and walk through them in your process. And if you don't do that, if you're responding, being driven by the fear, you will inevitably sacrifice parts of yourself which are core to who you are, what you need. And you will end up thinking that the world is doing you wrong, when in reality, in a way of speaking, you are living in a prison of your own making. It's sort of your own making. It comes in as a result of your childhood. But as we become adults, it is our dents and bruises. It doesn't matter who gave them to us. We can all agree that as a child, it wasn't my fault the way that the big people dented me. There was too much of a power differential. But now, as an adult, the dents and the bruises are mine. It is me who will suffer. Said another way, love is something that we can give when we have enough. Showing up to a conversation, to a relationship, or any other situation because we should, because it's the right thing to do, instead of understanding that it's because we can, will eventually lead to resentment or a breakdown in the connection to the other. Love is something that you give when you have enough. So you've got to take in energy. And that means you have to keep other energy out. And the execution of keeping that other energy out, saying no to people, saying I can't, saying I'm not willing to, that is where you will have to confront your dragon. The thing that tells you to get back in line, to do what's appropriate, what's acceptable, what Brad thinks you should do, what your Al-Anon cohort think you should do. But if you're operating from a place of should, you're incapable of love. Because should is about being good. Should is about following a commandment from somebody else. Should is in the service of ego. And love is not. Another thing that I teach about this is there's no such thing as too much love, that often stated euphemism that people sometimes associate with codependency. I just love too much. And that's not what it is. There's no such thing as too much love. Because love comes from capacity. Love means I have enough left over to give. I can give this thing to you, this act, this service, this presence, this whatever, this conversation. I can listen, whatever it is. I can give this to you because I have it to give. But if I'm just doing it because I'm being good, I'm the one being served, not the relationship, not you. And somewhere it will be revealed eventually that I am asking for something back, to be approved of, to be respected, to be offered gratitude. I'm unconsciously asking for something, taking something in the very act of giving itself. So we have to swallow our shadow, the parts of ourself that we've been told to hate, the parts of ourself that people told us to keep us in line and to serve their needs. We have to own what is ours, and that is the part that makes us available to love. Alan Watts, the great Buddhist teacher, once said, when you find out that there was never anything on the dark side to be afraid of, nothing is left but love. The thing that all of the mystics, the great teachers of the world, the great spiritual leaders of the world have in common is that they are more boundary than we are, than the average person. They are uncompromising in their self-care. And it's funny because we identify them as selfless. We identify them as loving, generous people, and that's true. But remember, that capacity that we're admiring comes from a commitment to them feeding themselves spiritually, physically, whatever they need. A great teacher, spiritual teacher, doesn't show up to some place because they should. They show up because it's in their nature to show up with kindness. They show up because they can. They show up because they have adequately fed themselves. They're not showing up to be fed. They're not showing up to get something back from the audience or from the person that's listening to them. They've already taken care of that somewhere else. And this is so hard to do in families, right? There's a limited number of hours in the day and resources, and we have competing needs. So we're inevitably going to struggle with this, all of us. James Hollis once wrote, "We were all raised to be nice, really nice. A reflexive niceness is pathogenic, loss of connection to the soul, and it is not nice. The opposite of such a reflexive niceness is called authenticity or integrity." So, like so much of what I talk about, we're flipping everything upside down. The reason that this stuff is so foreign to us is because the dominant culture teaches just the opposite of this. I borrowed this quote from a social media page. And it reads, "Children don't owe anyone a hug. Not a hello hug, not a goodbye hug, not a but we had a great time together hug, not a but I'll be sad if you don't hug. Children are not responsible for pleasing adults." Remember, if we go up believing, and most parents teach their children to be considerate of other people's feelings, they think that that's their main job, and it's not. That's not your job. Again, it's hard to understand, but your job is to help the child feel their feelings and to offer your regulated nervous system as something that gives them comfort, soothing, just to be present with them. Allow it to be. Let them be mad at you. Let them criticize you. Work on yourself and feed yourself enough so you can be available for those kinds of exchanges. That's what they need from us. So then when they go out in the world, they're not people pleasers, because parent pleasers become people pleasers, which is just self-betrayal in the service of keeping people close. So that's why parenting and marriage is so hard, so impossibly difficult. Because we have to do this really complex, nuanced, subtle thing in the service of the relationship, if the relationship quality is to improve, to be something that is worth our investment, our time. And for parents, more than for spouses, because the parent is in a different relationship with the child than anybody else, right? Those are not the same as everything else. It's not a back and forth. The parent's job is to support the child's development, not the other way around. So children take. That's their job. And our job is to find our limits and to communicate those as clearly, compassionately as we can, courageously as we can. And the child, the other, is going to tell us that we are mean, that we don't care, that we're cold, that we're stupid, whatever it is. And the one that works is the one they stick with, because they found our button. The ones that don't work, the names that they call us, the labels that they throw at us that don't stick, that don't really matter to us, they don't use those. So it is us who teaches our children how to manipulate us. And we do it unconsciously. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "You must love in such a way that the person you love feels free." Now, I know most people listening will, if they're listening in the context or thinking about this in the context of being a parent, they'll say, well, you can't just give freedom to your child. And of course, there is a responsibility as a parent to provide safety through limits and boundaries with children. Right? You have that if you've taken on the role of a parent, that's part of the job. That comes with the territory. That's its description. But remember, I talk about this in the journey of the parent, and I've seen this more than anything. Most permissive parents are controlling. Lots of strict parents aren't controlling. Control, freedom, as Thich Nhat Hanh alludes to, is not about the level of structure or rules. I've seen kids respond to high levels of structure extraordinarily well and thrive. The kind of control that Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about is emotional, psychological, spiritual control, guilt, shame, threatening, anger, intimidation, obligation, right? That's part of that guilt and shame family of energies. I have had students who have gone through the program that I ran for 28 years. On multiple occasions, children have told me that they've never felt so free in their entire life, even the ones who resisted it dramatically. And when they are challenged on that by me or by their parents, because it doesn't look like freedom compared to the kinds of freedoms that they had at home, what they were able to articulate was, yes, there were rules and consequences, but I was allowed to feel and think what I wanted. I didn't have to agree with my parents. I didn't have to like it. I didn't have to be happy. I didn't have to think my parents were great or wise. I didn't have to think that the staff were coming from a place of good intentions, right? We love to talk about our good intentions. We love to explain our intentions. And we hope in doing so that the person who's struggling with the boundary that we're communicating won't be upset anymore. We'll see our goodness and gladly go along with the boundary that we've expressed. One thing to know about intimacy and connection is that where there's a great power difference, intimacy suffers. Conversely, where there is intimacy, power is absent. And that becomes tricky with parents and children because parents do have power over children. And that's why I think this topic tonight is so important to study, to get to wrap your mind around, to understand where you're coming from, to understand where your parenting decisions are stemming from. And if you don't know yourself, you'll convince yourself that you're doing it out of love and you're doing it out of selflessness and to support the child. And you could very well be doing it out of fear, out of woundedness, out of an unhealed experience in childhood that you haven't unraveled for yourself. Hollis explained the ultimate test of the family. The ultimate test of the family is not whether it provides safety and predictability, but whether or to what degree each person can leave it freely and return freely as a larger person. Ideally, there is this energy of freedom within the boundaries. People that are permissive often try to use threats, guilt, shame, intimidation, fear to motivate others to change. People that are clear with their boundaries and their structure don't have to resort to that. And you're allowed to be angry, to not like it, to disagree, to believe that the parent is a horrible parent making the wrong decision, to believe that the spouse is crazy. But if you make peace with yourself, with your crazy, horrible, rotten self, nobody can use that idea against you. Nobody can use that belief against you because you've already made peace with it. The why of the boundary is the thing, not the how. Everybody wants to know the how. How do I set boundaries? How do I say it? You know, one of the points that Harriet Lerner makes in her book, The Dance of Anger, my favorite book on boundaries, is that we all go through an obnoxious stage of setting boundaries with somebody. Where there wasn't a boundary before, we become very clumsy, not very elegant. We can't do it with grace. It becomes blunt and awkward and sometimes overstated or said wrong. We have to allow, if we're going to do this work, we have to allow for that awkwardness, that obnoxious stage to exist. Because we don't go from no boundary setting or struggling with boundaries to graceful, elegant boundary setting. It takes time, a long, 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 long time. Boundaries are principally about taking care of the self. That's perhaps one of the biggest shifts from unhealthy boundaries to healthy boundaries. Boundaries are about self-care. And as a parent, if one of your responsibilities as you see it is to help guide a child, then some of the consequences that you set up, the limits that you set up with your child, come from your boundaries. I don't feel comfortable with you playing with a knife. I don't feel comfortable with you using drugs in the house, or bringing paraphernalia in, or showing up drunk. So here are going to be the limits, the consequences. They're not the same, but that's where they come from. Boundaries are principally about self-care, taking care of your serenity, taking the responsibility for your serenity is your main job. While most or many parents abdicate this responsibility to their children, to others. Consequences are underneath the umbrella of boundaries and self-care. Consequences are just the details or the expected effect of your boundaries as others relate to them. One of my favorite poems of all time by Khalil Gibran from his book, The Prophet. The poem entitled On Children starts off like this. And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, "Speak to us of children." And the first thing he said was this: your children are not your children. That's the first line of his answer in the poem to this mother. Your children are not your children. They're the sons of daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. We have this twisted idea that the children, we over-identify with them. We identify with their successes, with their failures. We feel guilt for their struggles. We feel shame because of their struggles. Right? That's ubiquitous. Everybody has some over-identification issues with their children. When I had my children, I thought my job was to shape them up the way that I thought a person should be. And coming from that mindset, my boundaries were abusive and coercive. Daniel Siegel and Mary Hartzell said it this way in their book, Parenting from the Inside Out. Even if we have come to understand ourselves well, they write, our children will still make their own journey through life. Although we may supply them with a secure foundation through our own deeper self-understanding, our role as parents serves to support our children's development, not guarantee its outcome. You see, the trick is to let go of the idea of holding yourself responsible for your children while still holding yourself responsible for what you do. That's the shift. It's subtle, but it's clear. You are responsible for your shame, your shaming, your guilting, your yelling, your intimidating, your temper, whatever it is that you do. You're responsible for those. But ultimately, especially as our children grow into adulthood, how they deal with it is now their responsibility. And it is our guilt for our mistakes that sometimes compromise our boundaries. Well, I've dented them, I've bruised them, so I need to give them an extra chance. I need to give them a leg up. I need to boost them. And that kind of relationship that stems from guilt further hampers the child's progress, that hampers the child's development. It is our guilt that is being served, not the child. Somebody once said very clearly, you either become the victim in your life or the hero in your life. When you realize that your life is your responsibility, when you take responsibility for your feelings, they are yours, for your serenity, your peace, you understand two things. You're either the victim or the hero in your own story. First, if I don't set a boundary, I'll feel anger and resentment. And this is often coupled, like I mentioned earlier, with a sense of righteousness. With this, I project onto the other person what is my responsibility, and I serve time in a prison of my own making. I make them the bad person for my needs not being fulfilled. The second thing is, if I set a boundary, risking rejection, conflict, abandonment, putting the peace at risk between us, and potentially even the relationship, I might have to deal with guilt and fear. Therefore, we must learn to tolerate the guilt that comes when we prioritize the relationship with ourselves over the relationship with the other, and the fear that other people won't love us unless we take care of them as a priority. Harriet Lerner, in quoting one of her patients in her book, The Dance of Anger, a woman who was trying to actually set a boundary with her father, with her aging father, and the demands that he was making on her time. She came to this crossroads that I'm describing. And Dr. Lerner says that she said this: no matter how long I'm in therapy, I'm still going to feel guilty if I say no to my father. But if I keep saying yes, I'm going to feel angry. So if I'm going to change, I guess I will just have to learn to live with some guilt for a while. It takes great courage, James Hollis says, to ask this fundamental question: what am I asking of this other that I ought to be doing for myself? If, for example, I am asking the other to be mindful of my self-esteem, I have a project waiting unaddressed. If I'm expecting the other to be the good parent and take care of me, then I have not grown up. If I'm expecting the other to spare me the rigor and terror of living my own journey, then I have abdicated from the chief task and most worthy reason for my incarnation on this earth. I'm asking somebody else to take care of and be responsible for my life. So some of the principles that I like to teach are: the boundaries are not walls, they are doors to tell the other person how to remain in connection with me. Boundaries are synonymous with self-care. They are not principally for changing other people. In boundary work, the question is never really what is the right boundary, but rather what do I need? This is the move from being right and being good to being a self that I talk about in the Audacity to Be You. Nobody can tell you the right boundary for you. Nobody can tell you. I can't. It doesn't make logical sense. It's not a technique that I'm using. It's founded on my basic understanding of what it means to be a person. I love this idea that a healthy boundary is the distance between me and you, where I can love both me and you simultaneously. We have to adopt this idea to have success in this area, that we have to make it our chief responsibility to know ourselves. Otherwise, the boundaries will often be in the service of controlling others to meet our needs. A healthy boundary works whether the other person responds the way you do or want. See, the reason we avoid boundaries is because if I can convince you, shame you, beg you, plead, debate, argue, nag, just wear you down, if I can get you to change, I don't have to do the scariest thing in the world, which is take care of myself, be responsible for my own life. I don't have to do the hardest thing of all, which is state a truth and follow through on it. I'd much rather change you in order to avoid my responsibility. More practically, because I know I'm speaking very conceptually, I want to give you some what it sounds like. Remember, this is just what it sounds like. I developed this idea of the 5 practical keys for boundaries. Boundaries are not, and these are on the context of parenting, but you can translate it to any relationship. Key number 1, boundaries are not for changing others, but derived from a sense of self, as in, this is what I feel good about. This is what I need in this situation. Key number 2, don't make it about being right, but rather about being a self, as in, I may be crazy, old-fashioned, or an idiot, but this is my boundary. This is the most powerful position that we can take. And it sets an example to our children for resisting peer pressure. Key number 3, similar to the previous key number 2, don't explain your decisions or boundaries to your children or to the other in the effort to get them to agree or be okay with the boundary. This mistake is so common. And again, it's why you're explaining it. It's okay to explain a boundary if somebody's curious. But if they come back with a rebuttal, they weren't asking out of curiosity. They were asking because they want to get into debate, because that's how the family relationship works. Whoever has the best argument wins. So we don't say, I'm doing this for your own good. We love to say that. We don't say, I'm doing it because I love you. As we learn in Al-Anon, no is a complete sentence. And oh, by the way, you can never explain yourself to somebody who doesn't have this awareness that I'm describing. And people who do have this awareness and are more conscious, they won't need an explanation. Key number 4, listen to them. Listen to the other person as much as you can, as much as you're able to. Not more than you're able to. Listen as much as you are able and no more than you are able. Respond with genuine empathy and allow them to be angry, hurt, or upset with you and your decisions. As in, I get it. You're angry, upset, and it makes sense. I'm sorry this is so hard, and I'm glad you're telling me how you feel. Or just simply listen and be silent. And finally, key number 5, don't use your emotions to try to get others, specifically your children, to change. Don't tell them about your fear, your anxiety, your anger, your worries. So then they have to be responsible for that and act in a way that you're not afraid anymore. Your fear is your responsibility. Your boundaries are a manifestation of that taking responsibility for your feelings, for your fears. When you do this, when you use emotions to try to get your children to change, you're telling the child that your feelings are their responsibility. This will lead them to believe that what others think and feel about them is their responsibility to manage. For example, we don't say, I'm angry, scared, or hurt as a substitute for boundary setting. And in the end, lastly, we can say that we are sorry when we fail. Every parent has limits, and every child will discover the end of those limits. We can say sorry when we fall short of the ideal. And with this, the child learns perhaps the most important lesson of all, what it means to be a human. Boundaries sound like no, yes, I can't, I don't want to, I'd rather not, I'm not okay with that, I'm tired, I can't listen to you right now, I need a break, I need to leave, I can't listen to that right now, I don't like watching news clips of things like that, I need a timeout or a break, I'm not willing to discuss this any further, I don't like that, I'm uncomfortable, I screwed up, I'm not coming, sorry, I have to cancel, I quit, here's what I'm willing to do, I may be crazy, weird, but this is what I'm okay with doing. I need to take a break from this. I don't want to hear the other side of the story right now. I don't want to have to explain myself. And of course, those are just some of the potentially infinite ways of expressing boundaries. The point is they can sound like anything. And from the outside, I or you don't get to decide what a healthy boundary is. It's up to that person. And sometimes people need to flop around and fail and stumble through it to figure it out. I know I do. And I've been at this a long time. Anger is often our signal. Resentment is a signal that I am expecting somebody to do something for me that is within my realm of responsibility. From The Dance of Anger, Harriet Lerner says, when we use our anger to make statements about the self, we assume a position of strength because no one can argue with our thoughts and feelings. They can try, but in response, we need not provide logical arguments in our defense. Instead, we can simply say, well, it may seem crazy or irrational to you, but this is the way that I see it. And in another place, she says, anger is a tool for change. Anger is a tool for change when it challenges us to become less of an expert on others and more of an expert on the self. That is so clear. When I'm feeling resentful, I realize that there's a boundary that I'm not setting, I'm not enforcing, I'm not executing, I'm not communicating. There's something that needs my attention about me. Of course, I, like most of us, love to feel self-righteous. So my go-to, my mother tongue, my natural instinct is for my anger to cause me to get clear about what your issue is, what your problem is. But that doesn't work that way. A boundary is a boundary is a boundary. Yelling, nagging, repetitive fights, comments, even repeating I feel statements is not a boundary. Trying to guilt or shame others or blame others for how we feel, for our happiness, for our lack of serenity, is not a boundary. Explaining yourself, debating, arguing, convincing, owning someone else's successes or failures, specifically our children, these are not boundaries. Resentments that linger or repeat are evidence that we need to do some boundary work. Hoping somebody will take care of us is not a boundary. This is our job. One of the principal ideas that my wife and I try to live by in our marriage, and we fall short, but we come back to it again and again, is I'm not responsible for making her happy. She is. And she's not responsible for making me happy. That's my job. Expecting, resenting others to act like we do or like we would is irrelevant. We don't get to decide what someone else's boundary should be. Triangulating, talking about somebody to somebody else, complaining, that's not a boundary. It can be a tool, for example, in psychotherapy or a group to get clear, but it's not a boundary. We try to change others so we don't have to set a boundary. If I can convince you or otherwise motivate you to act in a way that I want, then I would never need to set a boundary. In this way, I am abdicating my chief responsibility to you. The one tool that I recommend for parents to help children is to bring your own regulated nervous system to the relationship, to the conversation. And that requires you to do something for yourself. Going back to that idea of the mystics, the spiritual teachers, they don't compromise on their boundaries. Otherwise, they couldn't be so compassionate and so generous of spirit. They would be empty. This regulated nervous system that is our responsibility and that we're all going to fail at from time to time. This is the most important tool that you bring to your relationship, especially as a parent. Everything else will fall into place when your nervous system is regulated, because you're acting from a place of love, from capacity, from safety. And that is the parental project. Not raising the child, not telling the child how to be concerned about other people's feelings, but telling the child, teaching the child, modeling to the child how to take care of their own feelings, how to deal with them. So the principles that I want to leave you with tonight, the take-home principles, are: you don't get to win, you only get to choose how to lose. If you're looking for a boundary where everybody's going to get everything they want, in so many cases, that's not available. You get to choose how to lose. Boundaries are not walls, they are the doors that demonstrate to other people how to stay connected to you. Healthy boundaries, this is important. Healthy boundaries feel like abandonment. Healthy boundaries feel like abandonment. They feel cold. They feel like a lack of love to those who are conditioned to sacrifice their boundaries, who have poor boundaries, who are enmeshed, who come from an enmeshed family. Cutoff, right? That knee-jerk response of cutting off a relationship is only stylistically different than this enmeshment. Both enmeshment and somebody who has a knee-jerk cutoff, both of those lack this individuation, this courageous act toward taking care of yourself. It is the inability to maintain connection under stress. And one of the things that people get manipulated by when they finally set a tough boundary, for example, with a parent, and go no contact, is that they have this voice in the back of their head that they're just cutting off, that they're just giving up too easy, that they just throw people away like they're disposable. Those are the kinds of voices. That's the face of the dragon that you will have to face as you do this. Harriet Lerner says that we must prepare for the change back energy when we set boundaries. We must be prepared for some experience with guilt, shame, threats, insults, name-calling, begging, arguing, or debating. Being threatened to be cut off. Being told that we are a victim. And many others, whatever works. Healthy people will understand and respect boundaries. Often the most important boundaries you set will be with people who mistreat you when you set a boundary. I mean, one of the ways to know if your relationships are healthy is set boundaries. And if you're afraid to set a boundary with somebody, that could be, of course, from your own trauma background, or it could be that you sense or have some experience with this person that they don't respond well to them. But no matter where that fear comes from, it still is your task. A secure or an earned attachment, if it happens later in life, is the foundation of boundaries. If you have unhealed abandonment trauma, you will prioritize proximity over peace. And I love this line from the movie Wicked. the musical Wicked, from the song Divine Gravity, when Elphaba is being offered this grand prize, this honor among the people to be put in a position of power and prestige, but it goes against her values, against her boundary. And she sings right before the chorus, losing love that I guess I've lost, meaning that it was never love in the first place. Well, if that's love, she says, it comes at much too high a cost. That really is the realization of a healthy boundary. What's the cost? Because in relationships and marriage and with children, we have to make compromises and sacrifices all the time. We have to figure out how to bend, how to yield, how to submit, not just dictate and demand. That's easy. And so working this out is messy, even under really good conditions. But one way to think of it is, what do I need? Am I giving up something that's too great of a cost? And that's something only you can answer. The greatest secret in boundaries is that you must become the thing that you were taught to despise. You must go into the darkness, as Alan Watts implies. And once you do that, there's nothing left but love. Remember, before Siddhartha became the Buddha, the symbol of compassion, he left his family, which included his wife, I don't know how to pronounce her name, and their son, Rahula. People that are good at compassion, people that are capable of compassion and love, are well boundaried. They take care of themselves, they take the responsibility for their own life, and they don't expect or ask somebody else to rescue them from that project. All right, folks, I hope that's helpful. My new book is coming out April 7th. I'd love for you to pre-order a copy. Go to Amazon. It's called Stay in the Room. And the three authors are Jeff McLean, Michael McLean, and me, Dr. Brad Reedy. My two other books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. Stay in the Room is not going to be on Audible when it first comes out. That'll come a little bit later. If you're looking for a retreat, a very affordable retreat that is somewhere between the intensive and these kind of podcasts, kind of in the middle, a hybrid of the two, a lot of psychoeducation and group activities. July 12th through 17th, my daughter Emma and I will be at the Omega Institute again. Go to eomega.org, look at the workshops, and sign up for the Audacity Be You. And September 27th through October 2nd, we'll be teaching the same workshop at the Art of Living Retreat Center in North Carolina. Go to artoflivingretreatcenter.org to sign up. If you want to do a deep dive, a real deep dive, the best way that I know to do this work, the Finding You flagship program, Finding You, is that offering. April 8th through 12th is the next offering. We have support groups for the alumni of our program on the third Wednesday of each month. April 15th is the next offering. For all inquiries, for private intensives, for any of our services, for a coach, for a therapist who can help support you on this journey of the kind of work that I'm talking about here, go to our portal or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. I'm going to be back on Tuesday, March 24th. I'll have 2 broadcasts next week. On Tuesday, I'll do a topic. I haven't decided what it's going to be now. If you have any suggestions, you can email me. And then on Thursday of next week, I'll have another Ask Me Anything episode for the Inner Circle folks. So that'll be next week, the 24th and the 26th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for attending. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. And maybe most importantly, for on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thank you for doing your work. Thanks for showing up to things like this, because you doing your work makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening. Take care, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.